equate to infection by the virus. Okay, those are two different things. The only way to determine whether you're really infected is to identify the virus inside you and you're sick. You're actually developing symptoms. So if all you're going to do is measure only the people who are symptomatic, and if they're symptomatic, detect virus on them, and that is your case number, that becomes the denominator from which you calculate death rate. So you take the number of people who died over the cases that you discovered, and that's where they were coming up with this 3, 4, 5% death rate. That's not an accurate reflection, and it's not the way we calculate the death rate for flu. Okay, just so you know, the CDC, you can go to the CDC website. The CDC calculates the death rate for flu as the number of people who die divided by the estimated number of cases. These are not documented, demonstrated patients who have influenza. It's what the government estimates it to be. I just sent you two graphs. Okay. If you look at the first graph, okay, it's the death rate. It's the death rate here in the United States, which was starting to drop, and the minute it started to drop, it pumped back up. And the reason it pumped back up is they started to attribute anyone who died in the hospital as from COVID. You know, that's what's called statistical reassignment. Okay, it's a method that's used by people to get whatever they want. So if you're going to take someone who got to the hospital and died of a heart attack, and then post-mortem swab his nose and find coronavirus and say, hey, he died of COVID, that's not accurate, right? You know, Mark Twain said there's three kinds of lies: lies, damn lies, and statistics.
1 second here, guys, just to add some context here as well. The important thing for folks to realize is this, again, a pandemic, a viral pandemic, but this is also a pandemic of fear. And it's created by misinformation and by people trying to actually do good, right? Because we aren't panicking when someone dies from influenza. But let me give some other numbers. We talk about the death rates going on from COVID-19, and we're seeing numbers like, you know, peak at 600 a day, 800 a day, 1,000 a day. But here's some numbers to contextualize this. Globally, tuberculosis kills 3,000 people every day. Hepatitis, 2,400 people. HIV/AIDS, 2,100 people. Malaria, 2,000 people. So we have,
every single day.
Every single day around the world.
We're not shutting down everything all over the place, and many of those, some of those things are infectious as well.
And as bad as this is, again, for all of us, our hearts go out to people, and I know friends who have passed on this and who have been intubated on this, and it's a terrible challenge. There is one silver lining here that's important to realize. And I'll just say it, I think of this almost as a practice pandemic, in that this is not the first pandemic. There have been massively bad pandemics, and there will be ones in the future, period, as we're encroaching on the environment, as temperatures rise, and all of those elements. We can talk about that if you want. But ultimately, this pandemic could have had the transmissibility that this particular SARS-CoV-2 virus has, with the mortality of an Ebola, right? People treat this like it's a death sentence when they oh my God, I have COVID-19. Well, could be a mild flu, it could be a bad flu, but imagine if it had a 50% mortality rate. And what this practice pandemic has done, and I'm going to call that not to diminish the massive financial hardship this has had, but it's uncovered all of the breakpoints in our financial system, our governance system, and our healthcare system that hopefully, if nothing else, we learn how to repair those and not have that happen again. One other thing that it's doing, and goes to the extraordinary work of my older brother from another mother here, Bob Huri, is it's causing and allowing the FDA to iterate faster, because we've had a very slow, methodical, it's a bureaucracy. And we are seeing, again, diagnostics and vaccines. We'll talk about that in part 2 of this, but also antivirals and also therapeutics, one of which, very proud, is the brainchild of Bob Huri.
The piece that we're trying to get across to you is that, yes, this is serious, but so is the flu. and that the people that are most affected by the flu are also the elderly. If you look in Italy and see all these people dying, 79% of them have died are over 90, right? Literally 99% of the people who have the disease have some pre-existing condition, and more than half have three: cancer, heart disease, diabetes. And Bob, maybe you can mention about what's been happening, because let's put up what the Nobel Prize winner said from Stanford, just so you know. He was talking about, he's been on the air talking about this. He said, we're trying to do modeling, we're trying to look at numbers, and we're trying to understand what they're telling us. One problem with these tests is they're very sensitive. Small amounts, he shared with us, tiny amounts of the virus can be detected. So almost everyone who dies, no matter what the cause, will have coronavirus, but that's not the reason it killed you. It didn't kill you. You could have died in a car accident and be having it. So he's arguing that we've overreacted. We've shut down our economies based on those 5% projections, which aren't even true. Fauci himself is saying it's less than 1%. Maybe it's the same as the flu. But we've now built an entire system of destruction of the economy. People are so afraid because they don't know what the real facts are. And I saw on one day in February where the death rate jumped 600% in a day. I'm like, I'm not a genius virologist, but I know it's pretty hard for something to jump that much in a day. And so we went through the statisticians, and Bob, I know you can comment on this because you've seen it. They changed the rules on how they diagnose. You used to have a test to say you died of it. And they might put in the notes that, they had symptoms, or it was probable that it may have been brought on by COVID or the flu. Now they just count, they don't need any test, and they count it. So the numbers you're seeing that even seem high, they're not high in deaths, but even the death rate is not probably a fair representation. And Bob, maybe you can address that, the sensitivity of this, because the other thing we found is there's an article from 2014, and the title is "Where Did SARS Go?" And the description is it's a coronavirus, and that, some colds and flus are driven by it, and that, over time, 2/3 of us will end up having it. But as you said, Bob, we'll feel nothing or we'll have mild symptoms, that the people that are affected by it are those whose immune systems are compromised, which we're going to get to with you, Bob, with a solution. But those are compromised because of pre-existing conditions. And before, they would say they died of pneumonia, or they died of cancer, or they died of whatever. But now it's being pushed to, it's a COVID death. So can you address that, Bob? Because you're in New York in the hospitals, and you were sharing with me what you've seen.
So, Professor Levitt is a brilliant scientist in his own right, but he's also very practical and reasonable. The reality is what he's saying is true. You can create statistics that will fit any narrative. Okay. And, one doesn't realize up front, but the panic that was created because of the forecasted lethality of this virus